My Slippers. I got to explain this to you. They are exclusive. 3-tier cushioning system. It's like walking on clouds, right? We took the My Pillow patented foam, the one that you know and love, and they created a solid layer to provide incredible comfort. Don't forget to use the promo code Carter, CARTER, and you will receive 40% off of your My Slippers. Your whole family's going to love it.
This episode of the Sara Carter Podcast is sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. During this 20th anniversary year of 9/11, help America to never forget. Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at t2t.org. T2t.org.
By the way, you're going to notice my background is different if you're watching this on YouTube. And it's because I am in the great state of Texas still. And with my good friend, Gary Brugman, I've had him on the show before. Gary, I don't know, have you been on since the president pardoned you? We were together on January 6th, by the way. I think, was the FBI hounding you that day? Or do you think they accessed our emails or anything on January 6th?
I don't know. We were in the White House, so technically we were safe.
Yeah, technically we were okay.
Safe.
We did not go anywhere near Capitol Hill on that day, other than the morning when we walked past everyone.
Right.
So Gary is graciously letting me use his studio today while I'm in Texas so we could do this podcast. We're going to have Congressman Jim Jordan on. He has some breaking news that he is going to share with all of you, and it has to do with big tech and censorship. And we have so much to talk about because you are going to be terrified at what the government, the Biden administration, is attempting to do to you, to your family, and to our country. Now, before we get to that, remember to please subscribe and get all of the links at saracarter.com. Everything you need about what we're talking about here, all of the previous podcasts, go to saracarter.com. And while you're there, sign up for the email list. Why? Because you don't want to be censored. We don't want to be censored. We're living in a new world, folks. Take this seriously. This is not some imaginary sci-fi book. This is really happening in the United States of America. As Americans, I have some suggestions. So does Gary when we come up in a few minutes into the podcast. But before we get there, I want to talk to you about the Association of Mature American Citizens. We're not goofy. We're really mature. Just kidding. But AMAC believes in fighting the good fight against reckless government spending and the ever-expanding scope of the federal government, helping small businesses, securing our borders, supporting our military and respect for our veterans, standing for the flag and kneeling before God. That's what we believe in. By joining AMAC, you're taking the first steps to saving the America that you love. That's why the Sara Carter podcast exists. This show is about that. It's about saving America. That's why we have a sponsor like AMAC. AMAC offers an alternative to just about every benefit that AARP offers, but without that liberal agenda. Right now, we're actively fighting against the dangerous legislation being pushed in the form of HR 1, HR 127, everything else, everything crazy that the Biden administration is planning. And we're going to be talking about that in a few minutes. I stand with AMAC, and I hope that you will too. I encourage you to join today at amac.us/Carter. That's amac.us/Carter, CARTER. The benefits of membership are great, but guess what? The cause is even greater. Join today at amac.us/Carter. You will not regret it. Gary.
Man.
Stop calling me ma'am.
Yes.
That's driving
You've been telling me that for many years now.
He's calling me ma'am. I'm at AMAC now. I'm right there with you, sir. So Gary and I have, we've been friends for about, I would say maybe 14 years now. About
2006.
Since 2006. And we've watched all the changes in our country. You have been fighting. Actually, you were fighting for years, all those years, for your freedom.
Correct.
Basically, so that you could get rid of what we saw and your lawyers have argued was an unjust sentence. Gary was basically sentenced 2 years in prison. I don't want to go through the whole story again. You guys can hear about it on the previous podcast. It's gut-wrenching. But Gary is a true American, a first responder, the guy that was on the front lines of the border, working every single day to secure our nation. And what goes through your mind when you see the way things are today, Gary?
Well, like I said, I know what our agents are going through because I went through that in 1998 when Hurricane Mitch came and everybody from Central America was coming up, except it's tenfold now. Now that it's not a natural disaster that caused them to leave. Now it's just, Biden opening up the borders. And I can't blame them because who wouldn't want to, But
greatest nation on earth, right?
Exactly.
Greatest nation.
Land of milk and honey.
Right. And it's just wide open. And you're here in Texas, you're on the front lines of it. You have a lot of friends in law enforcement, a lot of friends in the Border Patrol, and they're telling you it's just nonstop. It's what I've been seeing.
They're all retiring, and they are tired because one thing that doesn't get out into the media is that their policies change every day. They have a policy of arresting people and doing the procedure. Then the next day it'll change because somebody in the White House wants it done different.
Right.
Areas aren't being covered. They're not allowed to do their jobs. And like I said before, the Border Patrol isn't designed to house people for weeks and months at a time. They're an agency that patrols, arrests, and they'll hold somebody for a weekend, and then they'll process them and take them to court. They're not a correctional institute.
Right. And
they're not jailers, and that's what they've been doing.
Right. And that's exactly what's been going on here. But I think things have gotten not just horrible at the border, but what we're talking about today, and I'm going to have Congressman Jim Jordan on here. He's a ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. He's incredible Republican who has literally, I've seen him on the front lines fighting for our country, fighting for the truth. And now he's taken on big tech. This is like a beast that we have never seen before. The most powerful companies in global history. And why? Because they basically control communication throughout the world. From, you think about Microsoft, think about Google, think about, Jack at Twitter and Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, and all of these big corporations that all are on the exact same page, monopolizing across the globe companies. That's what we're going to be talking about these monopolies, and can we do anything about it? But I want to tell you all something that you might not have heard. You might not have heard this, but the Biden administration just announced plans to create ways for Americans to report radicalized friends and family, quote unquote, in an effort to fight domestic terrorism to the government. So they're going to basically ask you to turn in your family if you believe that they are radicalized, if you believe that they don't support the Biden administration, question mark. In a conversation with reporters, one senior administration official, and this is coming from Breitbart, explained the importance of stopping politically fueled violence before it starts. We will work to improve public awareness of federal resources to address concerning or threatening behavior before violence occurs, the official told this reporter. The official cited the Department of Homeland Security's "If You See Something, Say Something" campaign that they use to help stop radical Islamic terror as domestic policy now. This involves creating contexts in which those who are family members or friends or coworkers know that there are pathways or avenues to raise concerns, to seek help for those who they perceive to be radicalizing and potentially radicalizing towards violence. I want to talk to you about something. I see our nation, and I don't know about you, Gary, but I see us slowly, through the critical race theory they're putting in our schools, through what's happening with the big tech and social media and censorship of people in our country. It just, even people that support, think about this, guys. The Iranian government threatens to destroy Israel off the face of the earth, threatens to kill all Jews, writes whatever they want online. They have never once been suspended by Twitter for this. If they have, it's been very short-lived. And most of the time, Twitter says that it doesn't violate their terms and their rules. But a president of the United States, a duly elected president, who I have a lot of respect for, which, by the way, pardoned Gary Brugman.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, I know. I know you've been wanting to tell him that in person, too.
I have.
Is not allowed on Twitter, not allowed on Facebook, has been suspended, his voice has been shut in a nation of liberty and freedom. To now have this government literally tell you to report your family and friends. Gary, you know what I think we should do? I don't know. You tell me. But I think we should start reporting people in the administration.
I think so.
I think we should just start calling the FBI and just reporting, hey, Kamala Harris wants to change our country and she's taking away our Constitution. I'd like to report her as a threat to our democracy.
Exactly. Everybody in the country do it.
Yes. Yeah. Everybody who listens to this will just start calling in. Susan Rice, her national policy is totally against our Constitution. I'd like to report her as a threat to our democracy. And every time there's some leftist out there that is trying to be a threat to our democracy and our Constitution, don't do anything rash. Don't act violently. Don't do that. Just pick up the phone, call the FBI's hotline number and the DHS and say, I have an entire school board that's trying to implement critical race theory.
That's brilliant. That's
right?
brilliant.
Let's do it. They opened up the hotlines for everyone. So let's just start calling. Let's start reporting people that are going to threaten our nation and that are going to threaten who we are as a people. Because I just want to remind all of you out there that are listening. It's interesting, Gary, because I went to see my family. I go to California and I see my aunts sometimes when I'm down there. And in fact, I'm planning another trip coming up real soon. But one of my aunts said to me, she's so remarkable, but she was so scared. And she said, Sara, that's what she was called. Sara, this is what we saw in Cuba. We saw the school systems slowly change. We saw the, journalists slowly become more and more leaning towards the left and Marxist in their ideology. We saw, the news organizations turn against, basically the opposition or the conservatives and really started implementing like these Marxist ideologies in Cuba. Now, granted, Cuba is a small island. It was probably easier for the communists to kind of take over Cuba. But what we're seeing in the United States with our education system,
CRT.
Critical race theory is like, it's really terrifying.
It is. And
parents don't want this. A lot of parents have gone to the schools, they're fighting it. And we're also seeing it like everywhere I go, like even in the great state of Texas. I mean, there's a battle. I think Dana Lausch, she has a great radio show and podcast. And I think she's been very public. And, there's been a lot of issues with critical race theory and parents fighting it here, even in the great state of Texas. And we're seeing it all across the United States. I know friends of mine in Fairfax, Virginia have been dealing with it. So there are a lot of issues here that I think need to be addressed. And I'm grateful that we have lawmakers that are willing to take on this fight because these are tough companies. I mean, these are behemoths. These are beasts. They're the biggest in the world.
And they're starting to, the lawmakers are starting to stand up. And what I've been seeing as well is, like you said, parents are starting to stand up. Teachers are starting to stand up. Finally, teachers standing up saying, if you're a student and you don't think this is right, stand up to your teacher.
That's right.
Everybody's saying that. So it's just like people are slowly getting tired of the things that are happening in the country.
I think so too. And I think what we got to do is just like keep our wits about us. We can't let it drive us crazy, but we have to use common sense. And like, we've got to figure out a way. How do we tackle this? Looking at from now, maybe to the next election, how do we tackle this? Do we go to our school board meetings? Do we fight them there? How can we support lawmakers like Jim Jordan who are willing to take on legally, companies like, Microsoft and Facebook and Twitter, and look at what, we saw Governor Ron DeSantis do in the another great state of Florida. I mean, it's like toss up, like Florida and Texas are like right up there, like the two states. And of course, Ohio, Congressman Jim Jordan, I'm not taking that away from you. But I think these are really important issues. I mean, do you think for each one of us, I mean, you're a Texan, you live here, you know how people are thinking. What are people saying about it out here? Because I mean, Texas is like its own planet, guys. It's like its own country. This is like the way it was. I mean, everywhere I go, American flags look right behind me. People are proud of their country, driving big trucks, loving America. Really, just like you said, Gary, everybody here understands why people want to come.
Exactly. Texas can't be taught. You can't be learned. You gotta catch Texas. You gotta become Texas. Texas is a lifestyle. It's just not a place to live.
Right. You're
but people are scared. People are scared and they're confused because how can we be letting this happen to our country? How is this happening? And it's just been going on for a long time, little by little. And, people are starting to stand up against it because we can't let it happen. Right now, like you said about the border, they're without telling anybody, they're moving these kids all over the country to different places in the middle of the night.
Oh, I saw that. Even with, I was talking to Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee, and she was telling me, look, it was unbelievable that they were flying children into Tennessee at midnight. The administration, because the Tennessee didn't want people bringing kids in. They didn't know where they were going to keep them, how they were going to manage it, what they were going to do. I've got Congressman Jim Jordan now on the line, so I'm going to bring him on. Thank you so much, Gary, for letting me use your studio.
Enjoy.
Thank you so much for being a part of the show, and I'm going to bring you back on, and I'm going to come back to Texas, and I'm going to do Gary's show. So, Gary, where can people listen to your podcast?
Anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, anywhere you can listen to podcasts, you get me on the Gary Brugman podcast.
There you go. You guys got to listen to him. He's fantastic. He's such a good friend and just such a great show. I love listening to you. I feel like I'm drinking a cup of coffee and hanging out with friends, right? I love it. Thank you so much, Gary.
So before we get to Congressman Jordan, I know he's waiting for us on the other line. I want to talk to you a little bit about Tunnel to Towers Foundation. And it carries forward this legacy of courage and heroism, much like, I tell you all the time, I feel about my husband and the role that he played in fighting the war on terror and being wounded in Afghanistan. But this is all about them. It's about us as families. It's about Gold Star families. It's about first responders. Those are firefighters, police officers, everybody and everyone who's on the front line. People who actually put their lives at risk for us every single day. It's so that we don't forget about them. I was really lucky. I got to meet CEO Frank Siller. He's embarking on this Never Forget walk, which I am going to be a part of at the very end. He's going to walk more than 500 miles through 6 states in 42 days. He's going to start at the Pentagon on August 1st through Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and then he's going to culminate his walk at Ground Zero on 9/11. That's where my husband and I are going to meet him. So the Towers of Light return to the Pentagon and Shanksville memorials in remembrance again this year, the 20th anniversary, right? I mean, imagine that. It's like I'm seeing it yesterday. I know I'm dating myself, but I remember watching it on television. It was for the first time that we lost those in 9/11 that were close to us. And there were so many people that lost their lives, but it touched everyone in the country. Every one of us felt like we were a part of something, right? We were going to lift each other up. We were going to hold each other up. I don't want you to forget about those with 9/11 related illnesses. They're also going to be honored at this ceremony on 9/12 and on Veterans Day. The words never forget actually require action. So take action now. Join Tunnel to Towers in its mission to do good. Donate $11 a month. That's it. Just $11 a month at t2t.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org.
Hey, Sarah, how are you?
I'm doing great, Congressman Jordan. Thank you so much. I cannot believe what I'm reading here, Congressman. I don't think I've ever been more in shock at how our country is shifting.
Well, I mean, you think about the last year, Sarah, every liberty we enjoy under the First Amendment has been assaulted. Every single one. I mean, you got 5 basic rights, fundamental rights under the First Amendment: right to practice your faith, right to assemble, right to petition, freedom of press, freedom of speech. Everyone has been attacked. I tell the story that, thinking of one of those, your right to assemble. 5 weeks ago, I spoke to the New Mexico Republican Party, but I spoke to them in Amarillo, Texas, because they had to go to Texas, as you were just talking about, the great state. They had to go to Texas to get freedom because they weren't allowed to assemble in their own state because of their Democrat governor. So, and on you could go. And of course, your speech rights are your most fundamental. So we're concerned about what big tech is doing, and we gotta put a stop to it.
Well, I got to tell you, Congressman, that is one of the things, my husband and a lot of his friends, they have given up so much for their nation willingly, in armed combat. Mm-hmm. They don't do that just because they were asked to do that. They do it because they absolutely believe in the foundation of our country.
Yes.
That our Constitution guarantees each and every one of us. And they want everybody that lives here, everybody that's a part of this great fabric of America, to have those rights, to protect those rights. And my husband was telling me the other day, and some of his buddies, and they were saying, what's happening to our country? What's going on here? Mm-hmm. If we don't have the ability to tell the truth, if we are being stifled, if our own president, a duly elected president, is pushed off of Twitter, pushed off of Facebook, then what is going on here? Who fights for our rights? And I know you're doing that. You've done some incredible work protecting this country and also fighting against the tyranny and weaponizing of our FBI, weaponizing of the DOJ, all of that President Trump and people close to him, associated with him, had to face during his presidency. Now you're taking on big tech. It is the biggest fight of your life.
Yeah. A couple basic things. One, as you rightly point out, we all know big tech is out to get conservatives. They censor conservatives. They deplatform the sitting president of the United States. They colluded with the big media last fall to keep the Hunter Biden story from we the people in the run-up to the presidential election. So we know that's happening. What do? 2 things have to happen. One, we need to take away their liability protection, the so-called Section 230, but that's not enough. So in addition to that, we also need to look at breaking these companies up and giving American citizens a private right of action to sue big tech when they censor you in particular, much like and candidates when they're censored in the context of an election, much like what Governor DeSantis has done in the state of Florida. So that's what needs to happen. But that's not what the Democrats are proposing. This week, there's going to be a markup on Wednesday in the House Judiciary Committee of 6 bills brought forward by the Democrats. Those pieces of legislation purport to do what we've described, to help us deal with big tech, but they do nothing to address the censorship. They do nothing to really break them up. What they do is empower big government, which I think is now going to collude with big tech even more. Think about this. Do you really think, here's the sponsors of the legislation, David Cicilline, Jerry Nadler, Hakeem Jeffries, and Joe Neguse, 4 impeachment managers. Do you really think they want President Trump to be back on the platforms and being able to communicate with the American people in the way that he always did? Do you really think the same party that had 2 Democrat members of Congress write a letter to the big carriers saying, take Fox News, take One American News, take Newsmax off your platforms, do you think they really want to stop the censorship of conservatives? So I am very nervous that while they're talking about going after big tech in these bills, they're not. They're actually empowering big government, which will collude with big tech to further harm the country.
I thought you brought up a really good point when I was reading excerpts from your letter, and one of it had to deal with Microsoft and the fact that there's nothing in there that'll prevent Microsoft, from being broken up. We've got Microsoft is like the second biggest in the world. I don't know if people really understand, like in the history of our world, we have never had companies with this much control over the people. We think of the United States and we're highly affected by this, but this is about a reach that we have never seen before, right?
Yeah, exactly. We had a witness a couple months ago, Clay Travis, who came and testified in one of our hearings, and he made a great point. He said the power that Pichai and Bezos and Zuckerberg and Dorsey and these individuals have relative to a century ago, the power of Ford, Carnegie Mellon, when those companies a century ago were broken up, the power these companies have today is infinitely greater. And so that's what we have to keep in mind. And their ability to censor conservative speech, particularly what we saw last fall, where, again, big government and big tech colluding with big media to prevent us from seeing the information. Now imagine what happens when it's big tech and big government working together. And frankly, Sarah, this is an important point, I think. We've already seen that play out. We saw the emails between Mr. Zuckerberg and Dr. Fauci where they were coordinating together to keep information from the American people, information that we now know was probably correct about the origins of this virus. So this is the concern with these bills. The power it gives the FTC, which just got its new chairman, Lena Khan, who now think about this. The new chairman of the FTC, 32-year-old, comes from a hard left perspective. Guess who she worked for before she went to the FTC? She worked for Jerry Nadler and David Cicilline and House Democrats on the Judiciary Committee. And she is now the FTC chairman, which these bills give all the power to. That is a concern of mine as well.
That's exactly what they do, right? I saw this under the Obama administration where they just fill in the government bureaucracy with all of their friends, people that they had worked at NGOs. Even I saw this when it came to the Environmental Protection Agency, right? It was just being filled up with, Sierra Club members and other members. And then all of a sudden you're looking around and the government is like literally been seized by the left. And I thought from your letter, and Congressman, I want to read a little excerpt from here because I think it's important for people to understand. And I don't know if everybody out there gets the American people were lied to about one of the most critical events in modern history, which was the COVID-19 outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
They were hiding the truth from everyone. And I want to read this. This is from your letter. It's big tech is out to get conservatives. We have witnessed several examples in recent years of how Facebook has censored conservative speech on its platform. Newly released documents indicating those were the emails you're referring to. And this is a letter, by the way, I want to make this clear, to Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. This is to Mark Zuckerberg, that you personally communicated with Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, about the COVID-19 pandemic. In light of Facebook's subsequent censorship of certain COVID-19 content, which I, by the way, was censored for publishing stories on, and I was just publishing straight stories. I even published a story, it was an aggregation from the Associated Press, and they basically punished me and shut down my Facebook. in light of Facebook's subsequent censorship of certain COVID-19 content, including content about the pandemic origin. These communications with Dr. Fauci raised the prospect that the federal government induced Facebook to censor certain speech in violation of the First Amendment. This is fascism.
That's exactly what we're afraid of with these bills that are now these 6 bills that have been introduced by the Democrats that they're going to mark up in the Judiciary Committee this week. The point you mentioned too, Sarah, where you were censored for simply putting a story on your site on Facebook. What we want to do, the Republican bill that we want to have, not what the Democrats are doing, is we want to have a legislation that would allow you to have a private right of action against them, against Facebook, when in fact they censor you. They'd have to tell you why they did it. You'd have a chance to get that information and push back on it when they do those kind of things to you, versus what the Democrats are doing, which is just to give more power to the Federal Trade Commission to further censor your speech.
Well, it's funny. They won't even acknowledge me. I can't even get one of those like blue check marks that I have on Twitter. They just do not want me to be verified at all. They're like, you are so unverified. Look, they punished a president. They literally said, we're going to give you 2 years of punishment, maybe possibly more if we decide. This is incredible because these are publicly traded companies and they are really have become a utility. They've really become a utility,
Yeah.
I believe, reaching a global level of communication throughout the world. And now I got to ask you about this Breitbart story that is so incredible. And, what we're talking about here is now reporting on your family and friends to fight domestic terrorism. I mean, they've already made up a big lie that there's like all these and this is I believe there's bad people out there. I'm not taking that away. There have always been bad people out there. There have always been racists out there, but I do not believe that our military and in our country, there are these hordes of white supremacists running around or these radical right conservatives that are ready to take down the country. I don't believe that at all. But instead of unifying the country, they're now asking people to report on their family and friends.
It's scary, isn't it? You saw what happened. I actually brought this up with the FBI director. You saw what happened up in Alaska where this couple, the Hupers, their door was kicked in. They were held at gunpoint, handcuffed, and interrogated for 4 hours. Turned out they hadn't even been in the Capitol on January 6th. That the FBI had the wrong couple. And they took their phones, their laptop, and they took their pocket-sized copy of the United States Constitution. And it's like, this is scary stuff.
Well, they take the Constitution like it's a bad thing. Like if you walk around, if you have an American flag, you're like some kind of radical. But you brought up a good point with the Alaska couple. What recourse do we have if the Department of Justice and the FBI, institutions that are supposed to be I believe, the heart of our country's system, right? That balance of power, Lady Justice. We're supposed to be able to trust that these institutions will not use arms or will not go after American citizens. What do we do when they just when they refuse to hold anyone responsible or themselves accountable?
Yeah, we keep highlighting every time that they infringe on First Amendment liberties, every time that they infringe on Americans' rights. We continue to make as much noise like you do, what we do with hearings and letters and things we can do in Congress. And then, frankly, you're going to have to elect President Trump in 2024 back to the White House, where we can have a Justice Department who will hold people accountable. I mean, the idea that, we still haven't got the Durham report, the idea that, you can go back to the IRS when they targeted our conservative friends around the country 10 years ago, and then of course what happened with the Mueller, but on and on they go. So no one ever seems to be held accountable. But I think the only way to do it is to have someone like President Trump back in the White House with the Justice Department that will actually do their job.
Durham disappeared. William Barr disappeared. I don't know what is going on here, and that's what scares me. And I just spoke to Trump about that on one of my latest podcasts he was on, and I was so grateful to have him on. And he even said it. He said, "I have no idea where they went. I was the president of the United States of America, and we had all of this evidence, and yet there's nothing is being done."
Yeah, I don't know any more than you do, Sarah. It's unfortunate. Like I said, we were supposed to have this report over a year ago. It's just frustrating for I think Well, it's most frustrating for the American people, the folks that I get to represent, the folks that listen and watch you all the time, and the great news and the great reporting that you do. So, yeah, all we can do is keep drawing attention to it. And like I said, it's why elections matter. It's why you got to have the right guy in the White House, and you got to have the right people in the Justice Department. But we got to win back the House, which I think we're going to do in 18 months. Then we got to hold the line, and then President Trump's going to run again, and he'll get reelected, and then we change things.
So you believe he'll run again?
I do. I think he's the best. He's our best candidate. I want him to run. I've said that. I'm for him. No president did more what he said he would do than President Trump. He's the most successful president, certainly in our lifetime, maybe the entire time of our country. So I want him to run, and if he doesn't run, I want Ron DeSantis to run. I think it's that basic.
Congressman Jim Jordan, thank you so much for being with us. I know you're busy. I know you got to run. I just want to thank you again for being a part of the Sara Carter Show.
You bet. Take care.
Okay, I think I'm still in a little bit of shock. I'm so grateful for the congressman and all the work he's going to be doing to fighting these, pieces of legislation that the Democrats are trying to push through, these fake pieces of legislation that really are going to do nothing to force big tech to abide by our Constitution. So it's nice to have Congressman Jim Jordan pointing that out for us. That's very, very important. I think one of the things that's been really bothersome, and I don't know if you're feeling it, is this fact that they want us to report on our family and friends. Remember when this started with COVID? Remember in Oregon and in other places, there were some local officials and some state officials that were asking people to report on their family and friends if there was more than one person at the house. I don't know. It was probably more than that, but it was like you couldn't have a gathering. You couldn't eat dinner. And we saw these videos, and we still do, from Canada, where they were like arresting people that showed up at the house for like holiday celebrations if neighbors reported on them. That is not the kind of country we want to live in, folks. Let me tell you what happens in a nation like that. In Cuba, for example, when my family would tell me stories, and my cousin, who was there throughout most of her young life under communism and finally came to the U.S. legally, by the way, legally and sponsored, she used to tell me that there was a neighbor that was considered kind of like the spy for the district center. Like they would report to the communist government, right, to their district, if anybody in town was misbehaving. So you'd have like a regular neighbor, and she would make sure that everybody on her street, on the block, actually abiding by the rules set forth by the Communist Party, by Fidel Castro's party. This is like how they lived in the USSR. So a lot of people couldn't get food at the market, right? You can't always get meat. You can't always get what you need. So a lot of times people will trade things on the black market. Like they'll trade mangoes for like a piece of meat, something that they grow for something else, maybe an article of clothing, and then they have to hide it. You have to hide like your steak. You have to wrap it up like in a piece of cloth, and you're riding your bicycle through town, and you got to hide it from Maria. I mean, this is all just to have a piece of meat, right? Or to have something that maybe you didn't have at home. But Maria was really good. She would always be watching everyone, and she'd have her little spies out there. So all the neighbors would be watching, because Maria wants to get like brownie points from the government. She's like, there's a lot of words for a person like that. And I'm not going to say them here because your children may be in the car listening to this. But then what would happen is, if she suspected, or if somebody said, hey, Maria got some idea that you have something, and a neighbor would come over, then my cousin and her family would have to take the food out of wherever they kept it, in the fridge, in a cooler. They would have to bury it out in the yard somewhere, or destroy it, or bury it and hope it wouldn't go bad, because then the government officials would come over and start ransacking her house looking for that one steak. Think about living your life like that. That's what we're actually doing to each other here. It's not going to stop there. It's going to be like what Congressman Jordan said, with a family in Alaska, where the FBI is inside their house, and they had nothing to do with January 6th. I mean, I walked through the whole entire area around the Capitol on January 6th in the morning. I didn't see anything happening. I ended up going to the White House with Gary, and Gary, you met at the beginning of the show, because he was pardoned by the president. I promised him on the day he was pardoned, I would definitely go with him to say his thank yous. And then everything happened. It was horrible. But I got to tell you, there is nothing more frightening than thinking about a government that's saying, we've got to investigate every single one of you, violate all of your constitutional rights, just to make sure nobody's messing around or supporting somebody we don't like. That's all this is about. They want to know who supports President Trump.
They want to destroy President Trump before the next election, before 2024. Mark my words. That is exactly what they want to do. They do not want him to run. They want to seize control of the government, and they're going to do it by just putting in place people in the bureaucracy, just like you've seen throughout the most important institutions, the FBI, the DOJ, and they're going to lay them there. Like, I don't even want to use the word sleeper cell, but not really, but like, they're going to put them there so that they will be able to take care of business. They can slow roll, even if there's a Republican in there, they can slow roll every process. They can make life difficult, which is what they tried to do with President Trump, which is what they did to him, which is why I'm stunned at how much he was able to accomplish in 4 years against that beast. But now there's something else. Now we're not just dealing with what's happening inside our institutions and the weaponization of those institutions, but now we're dealing with these behemoth organizations, communications organizations like Microsoft, Twitter, all of these tools that have changed our world, and they are monopolizing on everything. And if we don't stand up to it now, they could either be used for good or they could be used for evil. That with anything, with any new technology, that's the case. But I'm telling you, if we don't stand up to it now, we are going to be in a world of hurt. And we could be looking at the loss of our nation. Remember, don't forget to report all the bad guys. Those are the people that want to step all over our Constitution. The FBI obviously is going to have a hotline for people that they feel are a domestic threat to this nation. I personally believe anybody who tramples on the Constitution is that threat to our nation. So feel free to call the FBI and have them investigate whoever that is. Since they want you to report on your family and friends, I think we should report on some of the people that we're paying up on Capitol Hill that are wasting our tax dollars and trying to rip apart our Constitution. So go ahead, make those phone calls, tell them I sent you. Thank you so much for being a part of this Sara Carter Show. It's always wonderful to be here with you. I'm your family. You're my family. We're one America. Let's fight for it. And I wasn't talking about the news organization, although throw it out there for them. Who cares? We are one nation. And you know what? God bless this country. God bless you. God bless our families. This is Father's Day weekend. God bless to all the fathers out there and their wonderful children and all the fathers that do such a great job. Again, thank you for being a part of this show. Here at the Sara Carter Show, we're taking the story back.
Frank Ziller, I am so happy to actually meet you. Tunnel to Towers is a foundation that I am so proud being a sponsor for the Sara Carter Show. So thank you so much. When I read the spots, I'm looking at the stories of how the foundation started. I'm so moved. What was it that made you realize, we've got to do something. We've got to give something back?
Well, my brother 20 years ago on September 11, 2001, when he gave his life up while saving others, New York City firefighter that runs through a tunnel, the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, with 60 pounds of gear on his back, gets through that tunnel, goes up West Street into that South Tower and goes up those stairs. And along with 343 firefighters, 60 police officers, and so many others, he gives up his life. We needed to make sure that sacrifice and that story was not forgotten. So that's why we decided to do the foundation. He was the youngest of 7. We raised him. My parents died by the time he was 10 years old. So he has an unbelievable story of how he recovered from his own losses. And he realized that every day in life was precious, and he lived it that way. So he died the way he lived, serving others.
T2T.org. That's T2T.org. It's only $11 a month. It's up to every single one of us to do our part to help those that were willing to give everything to protect us and our families.